to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, the podcast that features conversations with writers of all types. Today's episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books has been sponsored by The Craft Studio. With locations in New York City, on the Upper East Side, and in Tribeca, The Craft Studio is a perfect place to bring your kids for some crafting fun. craftstudioNYC.com. I'm thrilled to welcome Gail Honeyman. Gail is the author of ELEANOR Oliphant is Completely Fine, which is her debut novel. A graduate of the Universities of Glasgow and Oxford, she currently lives in Glasgow, Scotland. Her book has sold to 30 territories worldwide, was a #1 New York Times bestseller, and has won many notable literary prizes, including the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize back when it was still a work in progress. So please join me in welcoming Gail Honeyman. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
So for any listeners out there who haven't read ELEANOR Oliphant is Completely Fine, which, by the way, I am obsessed with, and I thought it was the best book ever, can you just give them a quick synopsis of what your book is about?
Sure. So ELEANOR Oliphant is not completely fine, spoiler alert. She is 29 years old. She lives in Glasgow, in Scotland, and she has an apartment and a job, and she lives a very regimented life. She likes routine. She's quite a strange character. She's quite a challenging character. And I guess the best way to sum it up is that she's someone who has learned how to survive, but not really how to live.
Ooh,
if that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great description. I mean, I guess you've had time to practice, but it was really good. I liked it. So this was your first novel, and it's incredible. I thought that wasn't supposed to happen with first novels, that they were, you knock it out of the park like this. How did you end up writing this amazing book?
Well, I mean, I've just been incredibly lucky, as you say, that for a debut novel for the things that have happened, it still hasn't quite sunk in. I'm still pinching myself. I always wanted to write, and I kept putting it off and thinking, one day, and then it's a bit of a cliche, but it was my 40th birthday, and that way big birthdays sometimes focus your mind on things that you haven't done yet that you might want to do. So I said to myself, well, if you think you might want to try and do this, why don't you just get started? So I did. It took about 2.5 years because I had a full-time job, so I was writing in my lunch break.
Wow.
Mostly, just writing little and often, and I never expected. I mean, my main goal was just, as I say, just to prove to myself whether or not I could write a novel over 80,000 words, 90,000 words, tell a story over that kind of size of canvas. And I did not expect anything. I didn't expect anyone to publish it or any of the things that have subsequently happened.
Had you written short stories or shorter essays?
When I decided to start writing, I started with short stories, and they're not any easier, but in many ways, short fiction is more difficult to write, or just as difficult to write well, but they felt more achievable. You can start and finish a piece of short fiction over a period of weeks, whereas, and that's 3,000 words or 5,000 words, whereas 90,000 words is a bit of a more daunting prospect, and so, as I say, I just wanted to prove to myself whether or not I could grapple with that sort of size of canvas.
Wow. And why this particular story? What gave you the idea?
So it was a newspaper article that I read about loneliness, and it was a few years ago now, so I don't know how things are in the US, but in the UK, loneliness wasn't at that time discussed very much at all in the media. Things are much better now. Mm-hmm. But a few years ago, you didn't really see the topic discussed much at all, and if it was usually in the context of older people. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously an issue too, a big issue. But this particular article had an interview with young person, a woman in her 20s, and she lived in a big city and she had a job and an apartment. But she said to the interviewer, I leave work on Friday at 5 p.m. and I don't speak to another human being or see another human being till I go back to work again on Monday morning back in the office. And I was really struck by that because it was so unusual to hear a young person articulate that experience of loneliness, and also that it was very different to how the lives of urban 20-something professionals are usually portrayed in the media. You know, it's life's just one big party and you're out every night socialising, and sure, it is like that for lots of people, but it's obviously not like that for lots of people too, and it's not by choice and not through their own fault. It just, when I started to think about how people might find themselves living that kind of life, it really wasn't difficult to come up with lots of different routes and reasons for that to come about. So from there, that was the seed that the story and the character of Eleanor eventually grew from.
Interesting. I don't know about you. I feel like some of the loneliest moments in my life actually were when I was younger, because I feel like there's something about everybody being out and about and like sitting at outdoor cafes and eating dinner, and if you just have a minute where you're not with someone else, I feel like that can feel worse than, I don't know, later in life. Did you feel like that at all yourself, or was it just me and the woman?
No, I think I think it's a fairly universal experience. And when I've been talking to people at readers about the book, and certainly people, readers have said that it's not by no means an unusual experience.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's not, for most people, it isn't as prolonged an experience as it is for Eleanor, and not for the reasons
exactly
that Eleanor has for it, and hopefully that's the case. But the actual experience of loneliness itself is a universal one, I think.
Yeah, well, I think you did such a nice job of it. Although I have to say, Eleanor didn't seem to be bothered by it that much, right? I mean, you mentioned, that she had gone, like the woman in the article, that the whole weekend, and she said she didn't really seem to mind. She was just like, oh, look at that. I don't think I've spoken in a few days. Do you think it bothered her, or do you think it only bothers some people, or most people, or what do you think?
I think, it's interesting to think about solitude and loneliness as two different things. So I think Eleanor's by inclination quite a solitary person, so solitude is something that people choose and enjoy. Lots of people like spending some time on their own, and they find that energizing and enjoyable. But loneliness is not something that you choose; it's something that's imposed upon you. Mm-hmm. So I think Eleanor, as a character, she's someone who enjoys. She's quite solitary by nature, but she doesn't realise that she's also incredibly lonely. And those are two different things, because one is just part of your personality and is an enjoyable thing, and the other is something that's imposed upon you that you don't want, and it's not a state that you enjoy experiencing. And it's only when she starts to make connections slowly and in small steps, it's only when she starts to make connections, I think, then that she has the context to realise that she's lonely. She realises what she's been missing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Totally, yes. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Do you, you said you were writing it at your lunch break at work, so now I'm basically picturing you in ELEANOR Oliphant's, like, work office. Was that what it was like, or did you just copy it around you?
No, it's absolutely not autobiographical in any way.
No IT guy for you, huh?
For me, part of the challenge and the enjoyment of writing is to write something, different, characters who are totally different to you, and experiences that are different to the ones that you have, because that's part of the whole challenge of it, is to try and see the world through completely different eyes. And yeah.
What kind of job were you doing when you were writing the book?
I was working in higher education. Which was, I mean, it wasn't an office, so there's that in common. But again, that's quite, lots of people work in an office environment, but you don't tend to read about them very often. There isn't much fiction set in offices that I've come across. So
you were so funny about the planning of the holiday party. That was awesome. I love that. You're like, I guess people want to get together and have fun here. Anyway, it was so funny.
Thank you.
You were also so funny. I mean, your book could be just like how to make personal grooming into the funniest things in the entire world. Like the bikini wax, the manicure, the haircut, the makeover, the personal shopping. It's like you showed the readers all these things that we as women do all the time in this like whole new hilarious way, right? Because we do these crazy things and it is all just crazy. And I loved how at the manicure when she asks the nail technician if she always wanted that job, and the technician said that she'd been debating between working with animals or being a nail technician, but her mother had told her she should do nails. So Eleanor asks, is your mother an economist or a qualified careers advisor? Because if not, then I'm not sure that her advice was necessarily informed by the latest data on earnings projections and labor market demand. And then you said, the thought did strike me as she painted on various coats and various varnishes that she could have perhaps combined the two professions by becoming a dog groomer. However, I elected to keep my counsel on the matter. Sometimes when you tried to help with suggestions, it could lead to misunderstandings, not all of them entirely unpleasant. I loved that. So Eleanor, I found in your book, she often says and does these things totally unexpected, just unfiltered. And some people respond, a lot of them by laughing and a lot of them in different ways. Like, how do you think Eleanor reacts to those reactions?
Oh, that's a good question. That's an interesting question. I suspect she is equally puzzled by both sets of reactions. If she stops to think about them at all, when we first meet her, she's so enclosed in her own world, in her own little life, in her own Eleanor bubble. I'm not sure she even spends much time thinking about other people's reactions to her. And that's something that she learns to do more of as she starts to grow and develop as a character. I think to be more aware of herself and more aware of the impact of her interactions with other people and to care about them more as well, I think.
I mean, I definitely think empathy is something that a lot of people need to work on, sort of putting themselves in other shoes. This is just a particularly striking example, but I think it, illustrates a lot of people how they may unfortunately sometimes be feeling. You also, the other line I thought was so funny was after she got her Bobby Brown makeover when she's convinced that the makeup person is actually Bobby Brown, which was also funny. And you said, I look like a small Madagascan primate or perhaps a North American raccoon. It's charming. And she just says that to the woman. It's so funny. Anyway, now every time I'm like putting on my eye makeup, I'm thinking about this line of yours. So you're now like haunting me in my mirror.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it was so fun to write her because in all kinds of ways, but in those examples that you've cited, the everyday things that lots of people experience and don't really think about. So although she's 29 and she's very intelligent and she's very well educated, it's almost as though she's hatched out of an egg as a very intelligent, educated, newly hatched person. So just trying to look at these everyday things with completely fresh eyes and think, what would Eleanor actually make of this, never having encountered it before and having no preconceived ideas about it. So I'm glad to hear it made you laugh, because I made myself laugh when I was writing it. It's good to know that it made you laugh as well.
I'm sure I'm not the only one, which is why it's so popular. My husband kept looking over at me as I burst out laughing. And actually, I read, this was the first book that I read in the car with my kids as an audiobook, because I was dying to read it, and I had all these long drives to and from pick up at camp, and I would put it on and tell them basically what was going on in the story, and they got really into it. And the other day, my daughter was like, "Hey, whatever happened to that book? That really funny book?" Because the accent was funny to her. She's 5 years old. Anyway, so I combined the audiobook with the reading of the book, and anyway, it was really awesome. So the whole family was like very excited that I was talking to you today.
I think the actress Kathy McCann who read the audiobook did a fantastic job as well. She really did. A great narrator. Yeah,
that was really fantastic. So Eleanor's relationship with alcohol is another big part of the story. It ends up not serving her very well. You write a lot about her buying it and drinking it, and you had this funny passage where she tried to buy vodka before 10 and said, annoyingly, it meant that I would have to go out later to get my vodka. Why couldn't you just purchase it in the same way you bought, say, milk, to wit, at any shop at any time that it was open? Ridiculous. It was an illogical law, really. What was the difference between buying vodka at 10 past 9 in the morning and 10 past 10? Vodka is for me merely a household necessity, like a loaf of bread or a packet of tea. So, tell me about why you put this part of her, response to the rest of her life, or why did you just tell me more about the alcohol part, please.
Yeah, I guess it's back to her being someone who survives rather than fully lives her life, and so she doesn't socialise. She has no social life, so I wanted to show that there's no social enjoyment of it for her. It's a coping mechanism. It's a survival part of her, a very ill-informed part of her survival techniques. And something, again, without wanting to give away the plot, right. Something that can be developed, and as she develops as a person, her relationship with that can change too. Yeah. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm sort of skirting around things here, but I don't want to.
No, I don't want to ruin the plot either. I will be very. No, I think that's a good answer. I'll take it. So Eleanor's friendship with Raymond is her first sort of normal, healthy relationship with an adult male. It happens, by accident at the very beginning, and leads to this whole string of life-changing events in the book. Mm-hmm. You referenced her past relationship, and I don't know how much to give away here, and how she eventually ends up telling Raymond about the issues she had with her other relationship. How did you decide to have her interact with men in this way, like the previous one and then this one?
Mm-hmm. So without
giving anything away.
When we meet Eleanor when she's 29, that she has a whole path leading up to that point, which we won't go into, but which we do find out over the course of the novel, right. That has helped to shape her to become the person that she is when we first meet her, and it's not giving too much away to say that's been pretty challenging, to say the least. Right. When she encountered Raymond, my hope for Raymond as a character when I wrote him was, I think there are a lot of Raymonds in the world. He's a decent, kind, thoughtful, gentle, intelligent, just a really nice man, Yeah. And I think there are lots of Raymonds in the world, but they don't tend to feature in fiction very often for some reason. So I really wanted to include a character like that, and I really wanted to explore platonic friendship between men and women. In the context of Eleanor and Raymond, because again, I think that's something that's quite common in real life, but it's not something that features in fiction very often. Yeah. So his very small kindnesses to Eleanor at the start of the relationship, even though she's actually pretty rude to him when she first meets him, his very small kindnesses have disproportionately enormous ramifications in terms of Eleanor's development as a person, as a human, if that doesn't sound too grandiose. And so I wanted to explore that in particular, that interaction between the two of them as a platonic friendship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I like it. I think I can't go into all the other stuff because then I'd give more away. So I'll go to the next.
It's so difficult to talk about this book without giving things away.
It is. Well, I wanted to talk about Eleanor's, the weekly conversations that she has with her mom, and how you use them to sort of slowly, show more of these changes with her. So I'm just asking, like, from a process of the writing perspective, did you know this whole story from the beginning? Like, did you know when you started the weekly calls where the whole plot would end up? Is this one of those things some writers like, oh, my characters took on a life of their own? Or did you have it all outlined? Like, how did you go about doing it?
So, yeah, that's a really interesting question. There's a huge piece of information that's revealed right at the very end of the book. And I knew that piece of information. Okay. But I knew nothing about how I would get from Eleanor on page 1 to that piece of information becoming apparent on page 300 and whatever. So it was not, I don't plot in detail in the way that you describe some writers do. It was very much a case of I had the character, and I spent a lot of time developing the character and the voice of the character, and I let that guide me to get to this piece of information that's revealed at the end. It's probably not the most efficient way to write a novel. It might be more efficient to plot every chapter in detail, but that's not how I do it. I like to just let the character lead, as it were. But it's different, whatever works, but the great thing about writing is there is no right or wrong way to do it, so whatever works for each individual person is great for them.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. I don't think writing is necessarily about efficiency a lot of the time. I don't know, it's creative pursuits, I don't know, it's sort of, sometimes it's about the process, right? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just such an individual thing for each individual person. Each process is as individual as each person is. So, whatever works for you, I think is the way to go. And I really enjoyed the process of working out in real time with the characters, as it were, how we get to this piece of information revealed at the end.
And now that this book has really taken off, what has this been like for you? Tell me about some of these moments where you found out it was number 1 on the bestseller list, or what was that like? What do you tell your friends or your parents? Who are you in this with? Paint a picture for me.
It's well, I don't know when it will all sink in. Actually, it still feels pretty. It's going to take a while to, as I say, just because I had no expectation that any of this would happen. So it's just been the most wonderful set of surprises and experiences.
So no, any screaming, any jumping up and down, any high fives, nothing like that, no?
I think there's a lot of, just having to have things repeated quite a few times to think, did I imagine? What did you say? Or did I read that right? Because it just feels quite unbelievable, but it's amazing. And the other thing is, writing's necessarily a very solitary business, but being published is more of a team effort because you've got, all the people involved in bringing a manuscript to a finished book on a shelf. So it's wonderful to be able to celebrate. If a book does well, then, there's a whole team of people with the publisher involved behind making that happen too. So that's really nice to be able to share that with them too.
And are you one of those people who gets energy more from being alone, more introverted, or do you enjoy sort of being out and talking to everybody and doing the publicity and all that stuff?
I think probably writers it's quite an odd mixture, quite an odd skill set, because you have to actively enjoy spending lots of time alone, because when you're writing, that's the only way you can do it really, inside your own head. But then also you have to kind of be out in the world to interact with the world and people, and so to get ideas and be inspired. So it's an odd mix of enjoying alone time and also enjoying interacting. I don't know if there's a word for that. Just being a writer, maybe, being a writer.
Anyway, I was chatting with a girlfriend at this event last night, and she told me how she had just gotten back from a 2-day meditative retreat where she had to be silent the whole time. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I can never do that. And I was like, I'm glad, like, that's amazing you did that, but I could not talk for 2 days. But then I said to her, unless I was writing, because if I'm writing, it's sort of like I'm talking. It's just there's nobody exactly listening right then.
It's true. Well, you have a whole interior life. Imagine, there are characters and exactly. It's not your interior life is really busy with characters and voices when you're writing. Yeah.
Anyway, all of us crazy people here, but so I understand. So Reese Witherspoon is making this into a movie. Is that right?
Yes, very exciting.
That's so awesome. I'm actually sitting here wearing a Draper James shirt dress of Reese Witherspoon's. I'm like obsessed with her clothing company. Do you have like a wish list of who you see as playing Eleanor Oliphant? She's like so real to me. I can't even put a pretend like a real an actress into this role, but.
Do you know, it's really strange because I know my characters so intimately. I know everything about them, like how long their toenails are and what brand of shampoo they use and what kind of laundry products they use to wash their clothes. Every little detail, but I don't see a face when I write them. It's a much more. That's not the way that I picture them. So I've genuinely got a completely open mind about who might be cast in the various roles. And it'll be just so interesting and so exciting to see that happen.
Totally. That's exciting. And do you have any more books you're thinking of writing, or are you just going to coast on this one for a while, which would be totally justified?
Sorry?
No, I said, do you have any other books you're thinking of writing, or?
I'm working on a new book right now. I'm right in the middle of it. So I loved writing Eleanor Oliphant and the characters and the voices in that book, but I'm really enjoying working on something new and different right now. So watch this space, I guess.
Okay, well, I will. I absolutely will. And for any aspiring novelists who are sitting at their computers on their lunch break, debating if they should try to write the next great American novel, what advice would you give them?
Oh gosh, that's so difficult. I mean, I guess this is hardly a new piece of advice. It's very frequently cited, but personally, I think the best thing is just to read as much as you can and to read as widely as you can, because that's when you're reading other people's work, regardless of what genre it is, read outside of your own genre, read very widely, because whatever you read, you're subconsciously absorbing how to do things well, how when things don't work, why aren't they working? I have to say it's not. I'm sorry, it's not a new piece of advice,
That's
but
okay.
I do think it's tried and tested, and it's frequently cited for a reason. I think reading, and really widely reading as well, is one of the best things that you can do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your time today. I really, really appreciate it. I feel like I'm talking to a major celebrity because I just thought your book was so amazing. So thank you so much for talking to me and for being on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
My absolute pleasure. It's been lovely to talk to you too, Debbie.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books has been sponsored by The Craft Studio, with locations on the Upper East Side and in Tribeca. The Craft Studio is the perfect place to take your kids for all your crafting needs. CraftStudioNYC.com.